We have charts that are on the way and other senators coming, but I thought we would go ahead and get started if we could. I've never seen the political environment more contentious today than since I've been up here. Even sometimes more than usual, believe it or not. There's so many things that we disagree on, and we're in a presidential season, the primaries going on in the Republican Party. Who knows how that turns out? And all I can tell you is we found something we can be united about, and I hope the American people will get some comfort in that. Republican and Democratic senators are joining forces to stand behind our President Barack Obama on one very important issue. President Obama has stated that it's unacceptable for Iran to obtain nuclear capability. In his State of the Union address, he said, "We are determined as a nation to stop Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, and all options are on the table in that endeavor." So the purpose of this resolution and news conference is to say to the world, to our citizens, and to the President, we agree with you and we have your back, Mr. President. This is something that we need to rally around as a nation, regardless of party affiliation. President Obama is absolutely right. It is unacceptable for the Iranian theocracy to obtain nuclear capability. And a little bit about what they've been saying lately. The president of Iran recently referred to the Ayatollah Khomeini in saying this, as the Imam said, Israel must be wiped off the map. Anybody who recognizes Israel will burn in the fire of the Islamic nation's fury. So when you look at the quotes coming out of Iran, you believe in freedom, you're an Israeli, you're an American, you have to be very, very much concerned. So we stand with the President today. This resolution is a simple statement. Hopefully we can get a strong bipartisan vote. And it says, containing a nuclear-armed Iran is unacceptable. We must prevent them from getting nuclear capability, because if they obtain nuclear capability, it's going to lead to a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Sunni Arab nations will not allow themselves to be put in a position where the Shia Persians have nuclear trump card. The likelihood of this Iranian regime, who's associated with terrorist organizations throughout the globe, not sharing that nuclear capability with some terrorist organization, I think is small. So as President Obama said, it is unacceptable for them to obtain nuclear capability. This resolution echoes that sentiment. And all of us hope that we can stop the Iranian nuclear ambition through sanctions and diplomatic engagement. I, for one, believe that is still possible. I believe the sanctions are beginning to bite. With some help from the Russians and the Chinese, we would be able, I believe, to deter the efforts of the Iranian theocracy to obtain a nuclear weapon. In their mind, I think they believe that if I get a nuclear weapon, my regime will survive. We have to let them know that is not the case, that the best way for Iran to survive is to abandon nuclear weapon ambitions and become a productive member of the family of nations. I think that is still possible through economic and diplomatic means. And the reason we wanted to do the news conference today is to respond to what happened in Iran yesterday. The president of Iran talked about advancement in their nuclear program. We'll tell you about this in a second. The president of Iran yesterday let the world know we're moving forward. We will not be deterred regarding our path. And their path, they claim, is to build a nuclear power plant to generate power for peaceful purposes. Nobody believes that in their right mind. You're building a nuclear power plant at the bottom of a mountain. It's usually not the way you do these things. So most people who've looked at this closely believe that the ambitions of the Iranian theocracy is to develop nuclear weapons capability. And the press conference yesterday was designed, I think, to intimidate. The threat to 6 European nations: if you continue to engage in sanctions, we will cut off your oil. Sanctions are working, or they wouldn't be doing that. But we have to live in the world as it is. The press conference in Iran yesterday was designed to bolster the regime in the eyes of its own people because they know they're weak. It was designed to send a threatening message to the world at large. Our press conference here today is to show resolve in the face of those threats. A resolve in a bipartisan fashion to stand with the Obama administration to make sure that the Iranians never obtain nuclear capability, support sanctions at work, engage diplomatically, and yes, to keep all options on the table. Should we believe the Iranians when they talk about destroying Israel and spreading Persian Shia influence? Or is this just all rhetoric coming out of a theocracy that should not be taken seriously? I've got a photo I'd like to share with you. Here's a missile. Yeah. In a parade of nuclear weaponry, of missile technology, this missile, when it's translated, says Israel must be uprooted and erased from history. Now, if you're the Israeli Prime Minister, you think that's a joke? If you're an American who believes that if they got a nuclear weapon and rhetoric like that would lead to Armageddon, what are you supposed to do? Sit on the sidelines, contain them after they get this capability? The answer is no. We must stop them, all options being on the table. Here's another slogan in the parade. Did you speak at the podium, please? Excuse me? Okay. This was along the parade route. It's a banner. Israel should be wiped out of the face of the world. They can work on their grammar, but we get the message. So I guess what we're all saying in a bipartisan fashion is that we do not want to contain or contend with a nuclear-armed Iran because we think the whole world goes into darkness. We want to support our president, this administration, to stop that. We agree that all options should be on the table, but we prefer diplomatic and economic sanctions to bring about the deterrence that we're looking for. And this Congress needs to speak. This resolution, we hope, will get almost unanimous support from Republicans and Democrats. I will turn it now over to Senator Lieberman, but the news conference today is in response to what happened in Iran yesterday. We will not be intimidated. We will not lose our resolve. Please understand that you're embarking on a course that is not good for the Iranian people. Stop before it's too late. Senator.
Let me thank Senator Lindsey Graham not only for his words today, but for the leadership in putting this resolution together, along with Senator Bob Casey of Pennsylvania. As Lindsey said, yesterday the Iranian regime was moving in several different directions at once with regard to its nuclear weapons development program. First, it announced that it has continued to make significant advances in that nuclear weapons program. Second, it threatened to cut off oil sales to some European countries. Then later, it rescinded that threat. And finally, the Iranian regime said yesterday that it's ready to restart the T5+1 negotiations. Today, we 32 original sponsors of this U.S. Senate resolution want to say clearly and resolutely to Iran, you have only two choices. Peacefully negotiate to end your nuclear weapons program, or expect a military strike to disable that program. Distraction by negotiation while you become a nuclear power is not an option for you. And containment of a nuclear Iran is not an option for us. I know that containment might have been viable for the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but it's not going to work with the current fanatical Islamist regime in Tehran. This regime remains today the #1 state sponsor of terrorism in the world. It has hegemonic designs on its Arab neighbors and has advocated the annihilation of at least one other country, Israel, as a fundamental part of its foreign policy. As this resolution makes clear, such an outlaw nation cannot be allowed to obtain nuclear weapons capability because the protection of a nuclear umbrella would embolden Iran's sponsorship of terrorism, threaten to set off a chain of nuclear proliferation across the Middle East, and embolden the Iranian regime's brutal repression of its own people. Containment of a nuclear-armed Iran is therefore not an acceptable strategic foreign policy. It is a dangerous and deadly illusion. Now, let me say very clearly what this resolution does not do. It does not close the door to a peaceful negotiated solution to this crisis. And it is not an authorization for the use of military force. But I believe it is a statement to Iran, the international community, and President Obama that if Iran refuses to negotiate an end to their nuclear weapons program, and President Obama therefore decides that a military strike against that program is necessary in the interest of our national security, then he can count on strong bipartisan support in Congress for that decision. The fact is that it remains very much within our power and our allies' power to stop Iran from having nuclear weapons by diplomatic and economic means, if we possibly can, by military means, if we absolutely must. America's national security and our international credibility depend on us doing so. Senator Casey.
Thank you, Senator Lieberman. I want to thank both Senator Lieberman and Senator Graham for working with me and others on this resolution. I believe that what this resolution does is at least two things. We can talk about many, but at least two that I'll focus on. Number one is it provides a measure of clarity, I think, that we need on this issue, that I think is still lacking, despite all the work that folks in both parties have done. And this is a great, as you can tell here and on the resolution itself, a great bipartisan demonstration of resolve, as Senator Graham said. But there still, I think, is missing a measure of clarity, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Secondly, what this resolution does is provide a needed sense of urgency at a time I think that is lacking as well. So let me just step back for a moment and give a sense of where we are. I'd say first and foremost that the coalition that the President has brought together, and a lot of us have supported in terms of coming together, the International Committee on Sanctions is having an effect. We're seeing the effect already that sanctions are having within Iran itself. The currency has been adversely impacted. Food prices are increasing. So there's an impact on their energy sector, impact on their economy. So there's no question, and I think it's irrefutable, that sanctions are having an impact. However, when we talk about what we're willing to do and steps we need to take to prevent Iran from gaining nuclear capability, we have to be very clear about it. And that's what this resolution does. It makes it very clear that containment is not good enough. The containment is not a fallback position here. If we say we're going to prevent them from getting nuclear weapons, we have to mean it. So that clarity is very important. But also it's very important that we demonstrate a sense of urgency. We have a lot of debates here in the Senate about this issue, about what the regime has said they will do as it relates to our friend and ally Israel. We hear a lot about what the regime intends to do as it relates to our own security. And we almost had a horrific demonstration of that in a restaurant not far from here. So all of that evidence is on the table, but I think it's not been matched by a sense of urgency here in the United States. This is in our national security interest to come together in this way and pass a bipartisan resolution. I think it will send a very powerful message to the people of this country and the support they're giving us on this, but also send a very powerful message to the regime and the international community that this clarity is important and that we're determined to come together. Thank you very much.
I want to thank Senators Lieberman, Graham, and Casey for leading this effort and for all of my colleagues who are supporting this very important resolution. This really does demonstrate that there is a bipartisan commitment in the United States Senate to ensuring that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. And this morning in the Armed Services Committee, I had the chance to question Director Clapper and General Burgess. And when you think of the litany of things that Iran has done, they support the terrorist organization Hezbollah. Iran supports the terrorist organization Hamas. Iran has been providing arms to the insurgents in Afghanistan to kill our troops. They've been doing the same in Iraq and putting us in a position of undermining all of the security gains we've met there. We've hard-fought security gains that our troops fought and died for there. And Director Clapper said very clearly to me this morning that Iran represented a grave threat to our national security. Not only that, but a grave threat to the national security of our allies. What we are saying on a bipartisan basis is we are not going to sit aside and allow a grave threat to our national security, to the security of the United States of America, to just be in a position where we are very, very clear. We won't let it happen, and certainly if it takes military force, that needs to be an option on the table, and we are absolutely committed on a bipartisan basis to addressing this national security threat to our country and to our allies. And we will stand together on this issue on behalf of our country and make sure that we're protected, Americans are protected, and our allies, obviously Israel, but other allies around the world. Thank you.
Senator Menendez.
Well, let me thank Senator Lieberman and Senator Graham and Senator Casey, and please join with sponsoring this resolution. And let me explain my focus on this. As someone who has led the sanctions effort in the Senate with my colleague, Senator Kirk, and has had the total bipartisan support of the Senate, my focus is to send a very clear message to Ahmadinejad and Khamenei that, in fact, our efforts on sanctions are not simply to achieve a negotiation. Our efforts on sanctions is to end Iran's nuclear march towards nuclear weaponry that not just the United States recognizes it would be destabilizing throughout the region and the world, but that the International Atomic Energy Administration has clearly stated that their march is towards not simply for nuclear civilian purposes, but in fact for the purposes of containing nuclear weapons. And so therefore, the world has come to the conclusion of what the United States came to the conclusion a long time ago. So I think that this resolution sends a very clear message to the Iranian regime that our sanctions effort, and I must say that I believe that effort is having a real consequence before it is even fully effectuated. And I applaud the administration for doing significant efforts to ensure that, in fact, we are moving in the right direction in terms of this implementation. The real has significantly been reduced. Countries that have been major purchasers of Iranian oil, such as the Japanese and the South Koreans, are seeking actively to displace that reality, and increasingly even those countries that continue to purchase from Iran are seeking huge discounts that create real consequences to the Iranian economy. This is the central bank of Iran sanctions, along with the sanctions efforts that the banking committee, of which I sit on, and which was inspired on the legislation that I believe all my colleagues here signed on to, the Iran, North Korea, Syria Sanctions Act, that has moved to close all of the loopholes on SASADA, as well as pursue the National Iranian Oil Company and to avoid workarounds that the Iranians have tried to figure out. That this is all a continuous tightening economic noose that can hopefully deter Iranian action from its ultimate goal. But that ultimately the Iranians must know, as do those countries who would seek to side with themselves, that the United States national policy is that we cannot permit an Iran that has nuclear power, because this regime, not the Iranian people, but this regime is committed to nuclear weapons. And that would be an incredibly destabilizing force for the world, not only in the region, not just to our ally, the State of Israel, but to the United States of America. I want to close on that note. Some have suggested that this is about the concerns of others. This is the concern of the United States of America. We are committed. You know, a Shahab missile can easily hit Europe as well as hit other places in the Middle East. We are obligated under our treaty with NATO to respond to an attack on a NATO ally. The reality is that this is in the national interest and the national security of the United States, and it's for those reasons that I strongly support the resolution.
Senator Hoeven.
Thank you. I was recently in Israel, had the opportunity to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu. And it was very clear to me that he believes that these sanctions can be effective. And this is clearly our best chance to avoid the situation where either Israel or the United States is compelled to take military action. But to be effective, we have to fully impose the sanctions, the tools that are available. Now, Senator Kirk and Senator Menendez put forward legislation which we passed unanimously, that provides very strong sanctions on the banking network. Now, my background is a banker. My whole career before being in elective office was as a banker. And if Iran can't get money to fund their military, to fund their nuclear ambitions, to fund all the things that their government has to provide to keep things going, if they can't get paid for their oil, that's when they're going to have to sit down and talk to us in earnest. And not just talk to us, but take action. So this is our chance. Now, under the legislation that we passed, we provide that other countries, other companies cannot do business with Iran's central bank and do business with our banking system. That puts them in an incredibly difficult situation in terms of buying oil from Iran. And Iran cannot sell its oil if it can't get paid for its oil. This is a very powerful tool. It needs to be used to the fullest extent, because the other option is military action. And I understand that. I understand this is difficult with some of our allies and some of the countries around the world that we're working with from a diplomatic standpoint. Some of them buy their oil from Iran. But clearly, for all of us, the difficulty in dealing with the diplomacy is far preferable to military action. So when I came back several weeks ago, I went to Senator Graham and I said, you know, we've got to find a way to show support for these sanctions and urge the administration to fully implement them to the full extent of their ability, and then stand behind them and help them in that process. So I want to thank my colleagues for sponsoring this resolution. I ask all of our colleagues to join us. I think that this is an opportunity that we've got to grab with both hands. This is our opportunity to solve this incredible problem diplomatically. We need to do it.
Let me begin by joining in thanking our colleagues, Senators Graham and Lieberman and Casey for taking the lead on this resolution, but also to Senator Menendez and Senator Kerr for their leadership in so steadfastly championing the sanctions amendment that was added to the National Defense Authorization Act. And I think Senator Kerr would probably be with us today, if he could be, and I want to give a special thanks to Senator Kerr for his leadership. I also want to thank the administration, because every evidence is that it is robustly and energetically pursuing this policy of sanctions all around the world, sending a message that there will be action at the end of the 180-day period for any entity dealing with the Bank of Iran in violations of the sanctions law. We are at a historic turning point in history. This moment is the equivalent in historic and strategic importance of the Cuban Missile Crisis. It is unfolding more slowly, perhaps in greater complexity, but the sense of urgency is absolutely there. And this resolution will send a message about the will of the Congress and the American people, not only to the international community, but to the people of Iran, that there still is time to avoid military action, just as there was in the Cuban Missile Crisis. And fortunately, a peaceful means was explored and achieved. These sanctions are having an effect already. The erratic and irrational conduct of the regime in Iran is evidence that they are feeling the effect. The people of Iran need to know that there are options that they can explore, just as we will use every option, including military force if necessary. There is evidence that the Iranian regime itself, although outrageous as an outlaw among nations, is still capable of a cost-benefit approach. That is the word terminology that Director Clapper used this morning in his testimony when he said, "We judge Iran's nuclear decision-making is guided by a cost-benefit approach which offers the international community opportunity to influence Tehran." That's our reason for being here. We're for real. There's still time. Do the right thing, and you can avoid consequences that are unpalatable to you as well as a last resort for us.
Thank you, Senator Graham, Senator Casey, Senator Lieberman, for your leadership in pulling together this group of co-sponsors and senators who stand before you today. If you think about who's standing here today, we represent the very widest range of states, of backgrounds, of communities, of political philosophies in the Senate. And in this election year, some have commented that it is at times difficult for those of us who serve in Congress to agree that it's Thursday, let alone on a foreign policy approach. I think there are, as Senator Lieberman has suggested, a few clear messages being sent by the strength and breadth this resolution already enjoys, just with its introduction. I expect, like the amendment that Senator Menendez offered to the Defense Authorization Bill, which ultimately passed 100-0, there will be a similar unanimity across a very broad range of senators on this issue. That sends a message first to the people who hired us, who we represent, that whether we serve on the Banking Committee, the Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Relations Committee, or the Homeland Security Committee, they are worrying each and every day about their jobs, about the recovery, about the economy, and so are we. But the national security of our country is our paramount responsibility. And Iran's ceaseless march towards acquiring nuclear weapons capability is a threat not just to its region and its neighbors, but to all of us as Americans. And the second message to the administration, as Senator Graham opened with, is we have your back. As you continue to work tirelessly on economic sanctions, on diplomatic efforts, they will enjoy solid support from this Senate. And then third, to the Iranian regime and the Iranian people, we will end their nuclear weapons program. We will prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons capability. This is a deadly serious moment. The actions of the Iranian regime in recent days show their continued willingness to use surrogates, directly or indirectly, to attack diplomats and our allies. They should be clear about the unanimous determination of this Senate to support this administration and President Barack Obama when he said all options are and will remain on the table. As was said at the outset, I'll say in conclusion, we hope for a peaceful diplomatic resolution, but we are determined to stop Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons capability.
Senator Graham,
Yes, please.
you all say sanctions are having an effect, but how concerned are you that Israel does not feel the same way and may take preemptive strike, may strike militarily without coordinating with the United States? What sort of impact would that have on relations with the United States and also just impact in the region?
I think every country has to make sure that they do not lose control of their own destiny. There's no worse feeling in the world as a person, a family, or an organization or a nation to believe you've lost control of your own destiny. I am very confident that the Israeli government will support sanctions. I do believe they're working. I think what Bob and Mark did is going to have a very big effect when fully applied. I think there are people in the world engaging in this struggle that were on the sidelines because time is running out. So I'm going to Israel here soon. I will convey to the Israeli Prime Minister, we expect you never to lose control of your own destiny, but you need to understand there's been a sea change in Washington. Please understand that we share your view that Iran should not have a nuclear weapons capability, because it's just not about Israel, as Bob said, it is about us. This is a regime that would hold the whole world to blackmail if they had nuclear capability. This is a regime that could strike our interest in Europe, and God knows what they would do with a terrorist organization. So I speak of this problem with Iran from a very American point of view. I don't want this regime to have nuclear capability to share with the terrorists that could come to our homeland. But to the Israeli government, to our allies in Israel, this is a strong statement by the Senate in support of our president that we're determined not to let this happen. As Senator Hoeven said, they understand sanctions are working. So let's pour it on to the Russians and the Chinese. There's no upside for the world, for you, for your people, but for the Iranians to develop a nuclear capability. That doesn't make you a stronger nation. Anything that goes down the road of Armageddon, and that's where you would lead if you have a nuclear armed Mideast, is not good for anyone. So I'm confident that the Israeli government will be supportive of the U.S. efforts to impose sanctions, and we will just leave it at that.
Thank you. Is there something specific that you want the administration to do that they're not doing? You feel they haven't been clear enough that containment is not an option? Or do you think they're doing everything perfectly?
Well, I think clarity is what Senator, who said clarity? Senator Casey, today is a clarity moment. It's a moment to say that not only is the President of the United States determined it's unacceptable for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, the Senate agrees with that concept. I think you've heard a bipartisan show of support for sanctions. Senator Menendez's legislation in Kirk hasn't been opposed yet. The only thing I would say to the administration, do it faster if you can. I am supportive of their efforts. I want this to be nonpartisan. Generally speaking, I think the administration is really coming to the table with sanctions that will work. Use the tools the Congress gave. Rally the international community. So I'm not here to criticize.
In the interest of clarity, what do you mean by nuclear weapons capability? What does that mean?
It means when they create a nuclear program that can develop a weapon without a whole lot of effort. I know the difference between a nuclear power plant and a nuclear weapons complex, and I am convinced that their goal is not to produce nuclear power for peaceful purposes, and that capability that would lead to assembling a bomb will be achieved rather rapidly here, given the course that they're on. So nuclear capability is what I'm trying to deter all of us on. We don't want them to create a nuclear program that could be turned into a weapon material or weapon much too.
That's the components for a weapon or an amount of uranium or what?
We'll just leave it at this. A nuclear weapons capable of Iran is unacceptable to the United States.
Senator Graham, in your opening remarks.
In an earlier version of this resolution that read the following. It resolved that the United States affirms that it is within the power and capability the United States government to prevent the government of Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapons capability.
Let me tell you.
That was taken out.
Yeah,
Can you tell me
because
why?
I'm trying to build a bipartisan consensus around something we all believe in. This is not an authorization to use military force. No one understands the complexity of military force, I think, better than our military leaders, and I think I've been made aware this is not an easy endeavor. So what we want to do is show clarity and unity around the idea that containment is not a viable option. And as Senator Lieberman said, this is about showing support for the idea that it is the policy of the United States not to allow them to get nuclear capability, and we will pursue diplomatic sanctions to the fullest extent possible. If military force is the option to be chosen, that is the debate for another day. That is another discussion. But to the Iranian regime, your efforts yesterday to show to the world how far you have gone and how capable you are is not going to deter us from saying no to your ambitions. You can threaten to cut off oil to anybody and everybody. We're not looking at this from the next election cycle. We're not looking at it from the next quarterly report. You will not be allowed to achieve your dream of having a nuclear weapon to do mischief throughout the world. No matter what you do with your oil supply, we will not be intimidated. And the purpose of this news conference today is to stand by our president, who happens to be in a different party, telling him and the world, do what you must. Do it quickly.
What's the difference between capability and previous language that's talked about, American language that's talked about acquiring a nuclear weapon? Capability seems vaguer in terms of a benchmark than acquiring, and more recently the Secretary Menendez talked about stopping them from developing a nuclear weapon. Why move it back to capability now?
Well, I guess everybody will determine for themselves what it means, but to me, nuclear weapons capability means that they have crossed a red line and that they're capable of breaking out and producing a nuclear weapon. In other words, they have all the components necessary to do that. It is a standard that, in my opinion, is more real and perhaps in some senses higher than saying the red line is when they actually have nuclear weapons. And of course, the concern that we all have, this is not the single nuclear power plant in Iraq that Israel knocked out years ago, or the single nuclear plant in Syria that Israel knocked out a couple of years ago. The Iranians have been methodical and I'd say cunning in dispersing the various elements of their nuclear weapons development program, and now, particularly within the recent weeks, opening up at Cardin, near the city of Rome, a facility to enrich uranium inside a mountain. So, this is serious stuff. And I think, just go back to the preceding two questions real briefly. As Senator Graham said, I think we're here really to send a message of clarity to Iran. We're also sending a message of support to President Obama, and we're also countering the thoughts that clearly some policy thinkers have that we can live with a nuclear Iran, that we can contain them. And we're saying no. Whatever the consequences of a military strike to disable the Iranian nuclear program, the consequences of living with a nuclear Iran are much more grave and threatening to the security of every American.
Last question.
One last.
Senator Graham, you mentioned in your opening remarks this is specifically for Mr. Graham, if you don't mind. You mentioned the presidential campaign in your opening remarks.
Yes.
We're trying to find with a new survey that just came out, Mr. Santorum's ahead of Mr. Romney in Michigan. Why haven't any of you or your colleagues endorsed Mr. Santorum?
That's not the purpose of the news conference. The purpose of the news conference is to get away from the political moment and not talk about Republican Party politics and what's going on in the presidential contest. The purpose is to tell the Iranians that no matter what you think, America is not divided when it comes to you. You've been able to do something that no one else has been able to accomplish. I don't know how, I don't think they understand how hard it is to bring everybody together in America. But you've been able to do it. Why have you been able to do it? Because of your behavior. Because of the outrageous nature of what you want for your people and the world at large. So this is not about who's going to win Michigan. This is about the fact that every Republican, Democrat up here, almost unanimously, I predict, will say to the Iranian people, regardless of our theocracy, regardless of our differences back here at home, regardless of the contest we have on the Republican side, we have not taken our eye off the ball. If you think we're distracted and we can't come to grips with our debt, which apparently we're having a hard time doing, and if we can't find out who the nominee is going to be on the Republican side, that we have lost sight of you and what you're doing, you're wrong. So don't make a fatal mistake for yourself to think that America, Republicans and Democratic senators are not watching you and are concerned about what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let me just make one point. I won't comment on that last question, but two points. Number one is, and I think it's in furtherance of answering some of the questions that's already been asked. Number one is, what undergirds this resolution, one of the beliefs we have, is based upon the conduct of this regime over a long period of time. They are the backer and the banker of most of the bad guys in that region and well beyond that region. Whether it's Hezbollah, Hamas. By the way, folks who pose a direct threat to us, Shiite militias that have targeted our troops, Iran's been backed. That's point number one. Point number two is that even if someone could guarantee me that upon the acquisition of nuclear capabilities and launch capabilities, they could actually launch a nuclear weapon. Even if someone could wave a magic wand and say they will never ever launch one, the fact that they would reach that point alone is a driver of nuclear proliferation in that region, which puts all of us at risk, number one. And number two is, what if they acquire nuclear capability, and even absent the launch of a weapon, a bomb, that capability is put in the hands, as Senator Graham said, of a terrorist. So even if you could wave a magic wand so that they will never launch a weapon, the fact that they could give it to a terrorist and it would lead to proliferation in that region is reason alone to support this resolution.
Well done. Well done.